portion of my life in Warren, Michigan, and then moved north when my parents moved up to Charlevoix. And I spent a good portion of my life up in Charlevoix until I graduated. Then I came down and attended U of M. And when I got out of U of M, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I applied for the city of Ann Arbor, and I loved what I did there. And I found a calling to do things for less and try and save money wherever possible. So I spent a lot of years in Ann Arbor, 23 almost, and I was really involved in an asset management program development to really get that cost under control for a lot of the projects that were out there and get the life of everything extended. When the GIS portion of my project was finally completed in 2014, I decided at that point I needed to help my son. My son had become divorced at that point, and he had sole custody of his son. So I spent a year watching my grandson, which was great. But in moderation, it's fine. At my age at the time, I was having a hard time, so I went back to work. And in the time I was off, I got my master's degree. I moved back up north because at the time that's where we kind of wanted to retire. And now I've been up in Elk Rapids to start. I did a big water main project, which I'm sure if you have questions I can answer a lot of discussion about the infrastructure. And then most recently I was with the Grand Traverse County Road Commission.
1 second, please.
Which one?
I'm Lola.
Any better?
Is there a light on it?
Oh, there it goes. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
And then most recently I was with the Grand Traverse County Road Commission, and I was there for about 5 years, and they had a new board come in, and there were some issues I was not comfortable with. The board was requesting things that are in violation of state law, and I could not, under good conscience, do that. So I decided it was time, and we came to a mutual agreement to separate. And then I decided I still need to work, so I'm looking for something. And in the meantime, my mother-in-law, who lives in Ypsilanti, has had some heart issues, and her husband's got some cancer issues, so I needed to move down to the southeast of Michigan to help take care of them. And that's what brings me here today, hoping to be somebody that you could work with as your next city manager.
Well, welcome, Brad. I'm Mayor Mike Higgins, and my first question will be, what experience you have at recycling programs, and how would you increase the residents' recycling in Lincoln Park?
In Ann Arbor, they were very, very proactive with recycling. They went through many different forms throughout the years and eventually settled in on a single stream recycling process. I carried that forth up into Elk Rapids, where we put a separate recycling place at the same location. They did not have solid waste collection. You had to go either on a Wednesday or a Saturday to the compactor and drop off your waste and recycling at that place. I know it's not something you hear of down here, but that's actually fairly common in smaller urban or smaller rural communities, that they have a central location. But we really made it clear, and we talked to the people and explained to them why it was beneficial. At the time, it was a fairly easy explanation because the cost that you were getting back from plastics was pretty high. Right now, it's a little harder. You know, you're not getting the revenue back that you used to see because a lot more people are recycling. But there's a lot of information out there, and the limited amount of landfill space needs to be addressed for things that can't be recycled. And getting that information out there is definitely a way to incentivize your community to start looking at it, because eventually, you know, you've got to start recycling, otherwise you're going to fill up every bit of landfill space that's left.
Okay, we're going to go with the city clerk next.
Okay, if you're appointed the city manager, what is your plan for the first 180 days?
Okay, well, the first thing obviously is getting to meet everybody and know everybody. I need to know what the individuals on the council are interested in and where they're steering what the big projects they have, so that I can put together a plan for the long term of what needs to be put together for that 5-year plan, let's say. Also need to get to meet the staff and talk to them and figure out where their concerns are and what their needs are. I'm a very big supporter of the staff and getting them the tools that they need to wherever possible. So getting that information from them to be able to put together a plan is very important. And I think some one-on-ones with individual council members to kind of get that idea together of where the council wants to steer, and then start putting together these long-range plans. I know one of your things in your advertisement was you're very concerned with your infrastructure. I've done road projects, water projects, building projects. I'm big into the infrastructure and the asset management, so I think, getting an idea of how fast your goals are set to try and do some advancements in the condition of roads, water, sewer, and buildings, and maintaining the buildings. I think that's a lot of communication that has to happen with the council as well as the staff to find out what the staff is capable of doing to help assist on that.
Councilwoman Dupre?
What challenges do you see the city facing in the coming year?
You have some issues on your roads. And there are some areas that I found in my little drive around last night, and then also when I took a drive around with your chief of police and your fire chief, there are some areas where you have some significant road hazards. And they need to start being addressed fairly soon, because your cost to repair is going up substantially every year you let them sit in the condition they're in. There are a lot of ways around that. There's a lot of federal grants, a lot of state grants available that you can start looking at to try and get some money in to help. There's also some revolving funds that exist. If you have some water mains underneath some of these roads or some sanitary lines underneath these roads, but that's a significant challenge. I mean, your road system is your life's blood, pretty much. If you don't have good roads, people don't want to live on some of those streets. And you can see in a lot of communities, as the roads improve, the tax base goes up because people feel more comfortable. They like their area. You got to start looking at what can you do to increase your tax base too as you're doing these things. But there's a significant issue that needs to be addressed, obviously, in your roads. And as I was talking to the police chief and the fire chief, they were saying, some of your buildings are getting to a point where they're also fairly aged. So you need to start looking at what are you going to do to maintain them before those costs skyrocket. There's a curve, a deterioration curve built into every single asset you own, and you have to catch it at the top of that deterioration curve before it hits that fall-off point. Because if it hits that fall-off point, your expenditures are going to shoot up faster than you can possibly keep up.
Okay, go to,
Do you have experience bringing contracted services in-house? And if so, what was the situation, and were you able to recognize cost savings?
Okay. Most recently, at the Grand Traverse County Road Commission, when I started, pretty much all of their ditching was done by contracted workforce. And a lot of those ditching projects, obviously you don't have ditches, but you have curb and gutter, but a lot of those projects were very costly because of the mobilization costs associated with a contractor. We did a cost analysis. We said, okay, if we're going to do this, what do we need to do? And it did cost us quite a bit. I mean, it was a $350,000 excavator that we bought, and we bought some additional long-haul trucks, some trailers, and we put into place a system where we could do the ditching in-house. And over the course of the last 3 years, we were able to do 3/5 of the county in ditching, whereas normally, at the cost that we were spending before, we used to be on a 10-year rotation. So looking at that and looking at those processes, you have to look at, number one, is it cheaper? But number two, is it going to be your best cost benefit for bringing it in-house. Because if you're bringing it in-house and it's saving you money, but you have to ship something else out, and that's going to cost you even more, you have to be aware of what that opportunity cost that you're pushing aside by bringing it in-house. So there's a lot of discussion, and a lot of that is built into your asset management forms. In your asset management report, when I started at the Road Commission, we had an asset management report which was required by the state for roads, but we put in everything for culverts, signals, for the buildings we owned, every vehicle we owned, and we put that all together, and you weigh out where those benefits are to find out if it is truly a cost savings or if it is in that area, but it's not really a cost savings overall.
Councilwoman Lillian Ross.
Tell us about your experience in preparing and managing budgets. What do you think are the keys to successfully managing a budget in the public sector?
Okay. I was solely responsible for producing the budget at the Grand Traverse County Road Commission. I was the one that was held accountable for it. Last year we had a $37 million budget, and we put that together based on certain baseline needs. You know your staff costs, you know they're not going to change, so you have to take that into account. And you have other set costs, but then you have to start looking at, okay, where do we have other projects that need to be done? And you have, using that asset management approach, the idea with an asset management approach is to keep your budget straight across many, many years. You don't want to see a budget that jumps up to $24 million one year and then down to $16 million. You need to have that consistency in building that budget. So you have to look at your projects and see where you can afford to do your projects, but at the same time you cannot forget your maintenance, because maintenance is the key. You don't, if it's your house and you got a small leak in your roof, you're not going to wait till the roof caves in. You're going to fix that leak. You got to take the same approach to everything that you own as a city to make sure that you're hitting it when you see the first signs of deterioration, and you have to put that maintenance budget in place also, and make sure that you're balancing everything. And whatever the board, the council says, this is what you have to work with, and these are the funds that it's split across. You have to make sure that you're not exceeding that, but you also want to make sure that the council is 100% aware of where there are shortfalls and what those shortfalls mean if you cannot accomplish them.
Councilman Jason Burr.
This position requires you to respond to many requests in a short period of time. How do you ensure promptness, accuracy, and courtesy under these conditions?
Okay. I've been, as I said, in government my whole career. And one of my big things has always been for the people that, for myself as well as the people that work for me, if you get a call and you can't answer it and it comes in by noon, you should have an answer available. You should at least talk to that person by the end of the day. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have the answer, but you need to make that attempt by the end of the day. If it comes in after lunch and it's before the end of the day, you should be talking to them first thing the next day to make sure that you are not leaving them with the fact that, with an opinion that you don't care. So you need to make that original contact. Now that does not mean that you can give them an answer right away, but you have to tell them, okay, yes, I understand this is your concern. And then you need to talk to the staff that's going to be responsible for doing that answer and doing the work, if there is work to be done, to make sure that it can fit and it fits into their schedule. And then you get back with that person again to say, okay, this is roughly what we think. It's going to be 2 weeks before we can get out there, and it's going to be a 3-day project to get it done. Whatever that case is, you need to let them know and keep them informed. And if it's a council member, you're going to talk to the council member, and hopefully the council member understands that there are still limits on staff, and you can't automatically jump on something. But there are high priority things that come to the council member's agenda too, that maybe we do need to shift some resources to take care of a high need thing that we didn't recognize. If for some reason you can't meet a deadline, you need to make sure before that deadline comes that you call that original person back and say, hey, we are not going to meet the deadline that we promised you, but we are still working on it, we're aware of it, and we are going to be out there. We now think we're going to be out there a week later, but we do still have it on the agenda, and it will be taken care of. And unfortunately, some of the requests that come in, they're not your responsibility. I mean, there are things that people call that you are not responsible for. It's a private property issue. And if that's the case, you need to also be able to explain to them that that is not a city responsibility. It is something that we are aware of, but there's nothing we can do about it. It's something that the private property owner is the responsible person for that repair or situation.
Eric Zor?
When you become a city manager, how will you go about getting to know the community and building relationships with the stakeholders?
As far as like this city specifically, as I drove around last night and today, I realized you have a lot of adjacent communities. So the first thing, you number one, have to make sure you're talking to all your adjacent communities, getting to know them, getting to have a good rapport with them so that if there's an issue that runs a borderline street or that you're going to need to put traffic control signs out on their streets to let people know something's happening, that you have that type of interaction. And if there's something that you need to interact with them for other issues, you need to make sure you have those contacts in place. So that covers kind of your city people. You also have a county that comes through here in the Wayne County Street Department. They maintain several of the roads coming through your community and through this area. So you need to be on good terms with them. So you need to talk to them, and you need to say, hey, you know, let us know what we can do. We can work together. We can put some projects together to make sure that we're all saving money and cooperating with each other and getting the best results possible for the citizens of Lincoln Park, because Wayne County Street Department probably doesn't care about where they are necessarily as much as you do. So you got to build that relationship. And the reason they're maintaining some of these roads, they're state roads. So you need to make sure you're talking to MDOT. You also need to talk to your business community. One of the things that I did in Grand Traverse County is at least twice a year, I'd meet up with the Rotarians because they were very active and they had a very good volunteer network set up with us. So I would meet with them, I'd give them updates of what was happening around the community and what was going to happen the next year. So you need to talk to them. You've got your public schools. They need to use your roads, they need to interact with you. You have community police or police officers that are resource police officers for the schools. You need to be on good communication with them. So you need to talk to them on a regular basis to make sure everything is working smoothly. And if there's something that they need that we can be able to work together on, you know, there's a lot of times you can find projects where you can actually get a lot of work done and save some money by getting those people involved. And I was told you have a DDA. I met the gentleman here earlier. So, you know, talking to the people in the DDA, because they have some concerns that are unique to them. You know, your business community has been hurt throughout the U.S. because of the fact that people buy everything from Amazon now. So your retail stores are having a hard time. But there are ways to help, and there are ways to set up events or shut down an area to help build a community around some of these shopping areas. And one of the things when I was in Ann Arbor, they went to the extreme, I would say, but they did get a lot of people into downtown by putting in a lot of bike lanes or pedestrian paths. And I noticed at your Council Point Park, you've got a beautiful path running along there that people could run, walk, do whatever. People want to be out and about. They want to get some exercise. They want to be able to go down somewhere and have a couple of drinks and not worry about driving home. So, you know, whatever you can do to help those businesses survive, you need to be involved with. And you've got a DDA set up, that's the perfect way to start. And there's many others that you need to talk to, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
How would you describe your personality and how it qualifies you to work with as a public servant and a leader?
I am very open, first of all. I have no problems talking to anybody. So I have always had an open door policy no matter where I've been. And if people want to come in and talk to me about anything, I'm willing to sit down and talk with them. I feel like I am willing to make a hard decision when it needs to be made, but at the same time, talking to people. One of the first things I was assigned to in Ann Arbor, many years ago, was a sidewalk replacement program. And that was telling people that they had to, at their expense, fix the public sidewalk. So I spent 4 years going around the entire city telling people they had to spend money on something that wasn't even theirs. So I learned a lot about how to broach the subject and bring about a somewhat amicable solution to it. I've also had to tell people at the Road Commission, it's different when you're in a city, it's one thing. When you're out in the County Road Commission, if you're just in a subdivision in a county road, the County Road Commission is not responsible for the roads in that subdivision. The citizens are. And to tell them, again, that they need to set up a special assessment district to pay for repairs to their road, which they think is the responsibility of the Road Commission, is always tough. We had several subdivisions while I was there that we were able to talk through and get them on board and do a special assessment. Other people just won't spend the money on it, but either way, you have to be amicable and you have to talk to them and communicate. And dealing with people, there are some people that are just never going to be happy, but you cannot go to the negative with them. You have to always stay positive. Because anytime you go negative, it goes downhill quick.
Go next to City Clerk.
How would you prioritize the activities of the city staff?
I think a lot of that comes from the direction of the council. I mean, if the council has certain projects that they want to prioritize, I mean, there's that. You need to be able to make sure that you're answering to the council, mayor, and make sure that those projects are being taken care of. At the same time, detail work, obviously, the clerk's office is a perfect example. Exceptionally busy coming up here in the fall. You're going to have elections.
A minute or two to...
It's going to be, with all the new requirements of having 10 days worth of open polls, it's going to be problematic. So you have to, at times, look at shifting.
We will have no problems.
Okay. But it's hard. You have to admit, it's a hard thing to deal with. So at times, you may need to say, okay, we need to keep the clerk's office focused on this. Somebody else needs to answer the phones for the clerk for a couple of days so they can get this work done. So I think it's dealing with the staff, the managers, everybody involved, and talking to them and saying, hey, what's coming up on your agenda? This is what we know we have to keep working on because council has told us these are our projects. Where are you going to see a shortfall in resources? And when you start putting together, I use Microsoft Project as my way of tracking projects, but it tracks resources. And when you see that resource crunch, you need to be able to address that. And that means that potentially, yeah, you're going to shift somebody over to help out another department. It may not be doing what the department has the need for, but to help them to get those other bodies over there, you have to be communicative with your department heads all the time and make sure that they are not feeling the stress. If anybody feels the stress, it should be the manager of the city, not the rest of the employees. Make sure you keep them happy, and that's as a servant leadership principle, that's one of the things that it says is you are here to provide the resources that the people who work for you need to do their job. And it's not to make their life harder. So you shift around people if you need to, and you make sure that nobody feels like they cannot get something done. And if they feel like that, that's why you have the open door. That's why you have them come in and sit down and talk to you and say, hey, I don't see how we're going to do this. And then you start putting together solutions to make sure that it can get done. And if worst-case scenario comes, that you aren't going to make a deadline that council is giving you, you have to be upfront, same as with the citizens. Tell them, look, we're going to be a month late on this. It's just the way it is with staffing those and all the work that's coming, but you have to explain it, you have to communicate.
Councilman Dupre?
How do you attract, develop, and retain talent?
It's very tough right now. There's no question about it. I have found in the road commission especially, in the beginning, we were having a real issue with people who were more interested in being on their phone than they were working. So that was problematic. But one of the things that we did was we put together a engagement survey. We trekked with every single employee, and we started looking at where were these trends, where were problems, and we addressed a lot of those because people did not feel like they understood what they were doing. They felt like what they were doing didn't matter. And plain and simple, every single employee matters. Every single employee has a job here that needs to be done. So you have to make sure that you're keeping them informed and keeping them part of the solution. I have found miraculous solutions by listening to even the brand new truck drivers who worked somewhere else. They said, well, we used to do it this way. Okay, let's try it. And it saves time, it saves money, whatever. But you have to then keep them involved and engaged. Getting them in the door, obviously, most of the time it's a salary issue. So you have to be at least comparable or competitive to the surroundings for people that are doing the same type of work. Now, benefits for government are typically better than private sector, so you have to get that message out too, that, hey, you're going to get great benefits. One of the problems in the beginning is, like the younger people, they see just the bottom line. They don't see the fact that, hey, I've got medical insurance, because maybe they don't think they need it at the time. But we had two contractors, Elmer's Construction and Reith Riley Construction. Those were the only two big contractors that were up in our area. And we were finding that after about 35, people don't want to work 70 hours a week. And you start posting and you start getting the message out to some of the people there and say, hey, we're only going to work you 40 hours. When it snows, maybe you're going to work 60 once in a while. But you get that information out and you can attract people that are looking for more of a 40-hour week job, and because they want to spend time with their families. So it's a very convoluted way of approaching things simply because it's not easy against the private sector, which in a lot of cases are overpaying for labor right now.
Councilman Tobin?
What are trends in local government that could impact Lincoln Park?
I think right now is a great time because there is a lot of federal money available for grants. But that money's not going to last much longer. And I can't say for sure that nothing is going to happen, but when this IJJA is expired, it's going to be a lot less for all those infrastructure grants. And that includes water, that includes sewer, that includes roads, that includes a lot of different things. And you've got an opportunity right now to really seize onto some of that. And you've got SEMCOG right down the road that can help you get set up to try and get some of these grants in place. But after that's up, it's going to start becoming a lot more sparse, I think. My people that I talk to, and I talk to a lot of elected officials for the feds and on the state level, and there's just not going to be the amount of money available in the near future. So you need to start looking at it quickly, get as many of those grants as you can, and potentially look at some of these low-interest revolving fund type monies to start getting some money into this improvement of your infrastructure. And you've got that opportunity now. 4 years from now, when that act has expired, it's going to be a lot harder to get that money. So that's where you have to stay too, is you have to start looking at, okay, what does that mean for us 4 years from now, if the monies are not as good as they are now, you need to make sure that you're still keeping yourself continuously in the positive, because it's not going to be like it is today.
Councilman Ross.
How do you clearly convey your staff's recommendations and rationale to council?
One of the big things is, and I thought as I was talking to some of your staff, it's the same thing. Everybody has their own jargon. And the problem is, none of you work in every single area that all the different people here work in. So getting it communicated in simple, straightforward English without all the abbreviations is crucial. And making sure that you give the complete overview of what needs to happen to the council members, giving them enough time to absorb it and ask questions before it comes to a council meeting. The last thing you want is to hand something to a bunch of the council members that they have not seen. They're not going to be prepared, and they can't read 20 pages and try and take it all in. You need to make sure that you're giving them the opportunity to have feedback, putting it in simple language, but also giving enough details, the financial impacts. What does it mean for the personnel impacts? What does it mean to our asset management plan, our 5-year capital improvement plan? How does it affect everything so that the council is 100% informed before anything gets in front of them? And a lot of that is, we did a strategic plan in Grand Traverse County, and everything was labeled of what type of strategic objective we had. We put everything out and we said, okay, this meets strategic objective 1F. And we said on every single council item, what is it about and what does it respond to for the strategic plan? And these are the details. You're probably not going to read through 100% of everything, but you need to have it available if it's something that you're trying to figure out. So it's giving enough information and making sure it's in plain English. That's the one thing. Occasionally I slip into jargon myself. It's one of those things, and I always say, just throw something at me, I'll get it out of the jargon. So,
Jason Bear.
What types of community and economic development projects have you worked on in the past, and what were the outcomes?
When I was in Ann Arbor, you have to understand there, the DDA was massive. Okay, the DDA encompassed a lot of the city, downtown. And they also had 12 parking structures valued at the time at over $200 million that they owned. But they had a lot of revenue coming in off those, and they had a lot of projects that they wanted to do. So we did a lot of streetscapes. I did a lot of traffic analysis for them to see where we could narrow roads. At one point in Ann Arbor, they had north and south paired roads going through downtown. And that was problematic for some of the business folks because that means people were following those traffic lights, never even noticing what was going on. So a lot of those went back to two-way to kind of bring the traffic speeds down a little bit, which helped also having sidewalk cafes out there and beautifying that downtown area, and that really brought the restaurant community up in some of these other streets. And if you look through downtown Ann Arbor now, most of it is either like high-end art gallery type whatever, but it's a lot of restaurants. So I was very involved with that for a lot of years when I was in Ann Arbor. In Elk Rapids, we applied for a grant, and it took a long time. I mean, it took many applications, but we had a road that was a high-volume road, but it was right through the commercial district, and we finally got a federal grant as well as a state grant on that. After I had left, it came in, and it was designed to turn that from a 3-lane road with their center turn lane into a boulevard. Well, that slowed down traffic. It also made it more appetizing for people who wanted to sit out in front of these restaurants on a nice summer evening to have a meal with their family or have a few drinks with friends. So I was involved with that, and we put together that, and it took a long time simply because Elk Rapids is a fairly well-off community. So a lot of the points that were awarded, they were not getting anything on, so it took a while there. I've also been involved with some brownfield development projects for Grand Traverse, but that was pretty big. I mean, those were areas that there had been a large farm on some land, and it was a long, involved project, and it'll probably be another 10 years before it's done, because there was about 60 acres of contaminated land, and they're in the process still of cleaning it up. But we did get some commercial development on it. They put a Blaine's Farm and Fleet, which I've never seen one down south, but, I mean, they're big up north. So that's a massive, it's like a Lowe's type store. And we got, did some of that. And we built roads to help in there. And then with that tax abatement that we were able to deal with, the County Road Commission will get reimbursed after the other credits are fulfilled.
Councilman Zor?
How do you handle public criticism?
I've been criticized my whole life. I would say, inspecting sidewalks, I was called everything in the book. It doesn't bother me. I understand people are going to be upset. I think, your biggest asset is to talk to them and listen to their problems. A lot of times people are just upset. If you can talk to them and let them express their frustration, a lot of times you can make them a little more comfortable at least. They may not be happy with the situation, but they'll at least understand it. Whenever an article came up at the Road Commission about the bridge crossing that they were trying to get built, everything was negative from one group. It is what it is. Nobody's going to be happy with every decision you make. You have to be able to let that roll off your back.
Can you describe a situation where you needed to understand multiple personalities coming together and how you were able to deal with it on an active goal?
Okay. Well, I talked to your staff about a road project that I did coming into the VA hospital in Ann Arbor. And it was, I think it's still very apropos. So if anybody's familiar with where the VA hospital is, it's fairly accessible now. Back in the early 90s, not so much. The main route into it was a gravel road, and it was very steep. And you had competing demands from people that were very, very interested in keeping it a rural characteristic road with a lot of trees and everything else. They didn't want anything disturbed from the natural environment. You had engineers who wanted to make sure that it was done this way because this is the only safe way. And unfortunately, I was a part of the group that was kind of overruled by the environmental group, and they ended up building the road at 13%. Typically, 7% is really pushing it on a road. 13% is just not manageable. But we were able to talk to them and get them to kind of back off some of the environmental stress and move into putting up some substantial retaining walls so that people wouldn't go down this massive hill and go off into the ditch. Long story short, I guess, is it cost $1 million for the retaining wall to be put in, and it got hit 3 times in the first winter, costing over $150,000 worth of repairs. So, I wish I had stood up more and argued more that this is not safe at the time. So it wasn't a great success, but I've dealt with a lot of that since then, and I feel that was one of the changes in my approach to dealing with people and listening to every side of every argument. Because there may be some valid things that can be addressed. And I'm a big outdoorsman. I love being outside, doing things in the woods. I don't want to damage the environment any more than anybody else. So I appreciate and I want to make sure that you're doing things that aren't detrimental to anybody else. And I know there are ways around that. We found a lot of solutions at the Road Commission. We put in wood timber bridges instead of concrete bridges.
Okay, we need to wrap this up.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask one question, and the wrap-up, if anything that you would like to convey to us, why you want to come to Lincoln Park, and what, give us, your wrap-up on what, what your best qualities.
Okay. Well, I think, one thing is I'm very, very insistent on being honest and conveying honesty throughout. I really do not like it when people try to make excuses. Everybody makes a mistake. Tell me the truth. Yes, I can deal with it. We'll figure out a solution. So it's a lot of times, that's one of the things I strive to make my word very important. If I give somebody my word that I'm going to do something, I want to make sure I do everything I can to get that done. My asset management skills, I think, are huge. I have been doing it since before it was really recognized in the state. I started doing asset management in '93, and I think that the whole approach and the holistic way of looking at asset management can save so much money. I mean, we saved, in Grand Traverse, they're saving over $1 million every year by implementing some of the asset management principles that we put in place. So I think those are two big things. And also, like I say, I'm willing to talk to anybody. I have no issues. I'm never going to hold anything personal. It's a business relationship. I can be friends with you even if you disagree with me. Doesn't matter. There's business, there's outside business. Why I want to be down south, my mother-in-law and father-in-law live in Ypsilanti. My father-in-law is starting to recover from cancer, and now my mother-in-law just went in for 2 valve replacements on her heart. My father-in-law, he worked at Ford for 55 years. So he's used to being out and doing things and being active. And for him to not be able to mow his own lawn is very problematic. He never really trusted me, but now he's definitely not going to trust the contractor. So being down in southeast Michigan is something I can handle and want to do to be able to help my in-laws. They've done everything they can to help us and deal with things that were shortfalls when our kids were younger. They took care of a lot of the things with our kids. So I just want to be able to help them. And this is a great location for me because I'm just down the road. It takes me less than a half an hour from the east side of Ypsi to get here. And it's just, I want to be in southeast Michigan again for at least the next 10 to 15 years because I think they've got that. It's just they're not going to be able to do what they have been doing in the past.
Okay, thank you for being here, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was good.